This is DJ.
And this is Ish.
And this is
Season 6 of
Pero Let Me Tell You.
All right, mi gente. All right, so, if you're listening to the show at any point in time in the past, you know that there's one thing we are absolutely very, very, very adamant about, which is that, damn it, as American citizens, you better get out there and vote, okay? It is your civic duty. And so, of course, with that in mind, we had to welcome someone today who is working with an organization that is really about, civic engagement and really getting people to not have that apathy. So, I'm here along with Darian with Ibis Valdes, who is the president of the League of Women Voters for Miami-Dade County. And I think that's like the longest title I've ever said of a guest on this show.
Welcome to Pero Let Me Tell You.
Yes, thank you so much. So, all right, let's start at the beginning. This organization has been around for a while, right? And I think it's an organization that most people probably aren't too familiar with. Like, they may have heard it once or twice, but they don't really know what it stands for. For instance, earlier we were talking, and I found out that you don't only have to be a woman to be a member of the League of Women Voters anymore. So
we welcome everybody.
Yeah. So, we are a welcoming podcast, too. So I just, would love to hear a little bit about, like, the history and how you got involved with them.
Absolutely. Would love to explain more about the League of Women Voters. So the League was founded over 100 years ago when women earned the right to vote in the United States when the 19th Amendment was ratified in the U.S. Constitution, meaning that it became domestic law. So the first chapter was founded in Chicago in the early 1920s. Now the League is present all over the United States. I am super proud to be the president of the Miami-Dade chapter, which has been in operation since the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
And how many chapters are there? Is there like a different chapter in every state or in every county?
Yes, it goes by county, then by state, and then there's the U.S. League of Women Voters.
Oh, wow. So all over the country.
Yes. So local, state, and then national.
And the league, in terms of, let's bring it down to Florida and Miami-Dade County. So what are the biggest goals of the league for Miami-Dade?
So the league's purpose, mission, values is summed up in a very simple phrase: empowering voters, defending democracy. That is our sole purpose for existing. We are a nonpartisan organization, meaning that we do not ever tell you what candidate to vote for. We do not align ourselves with any party. The only thing that we're in pro of is the U.S. Constitution. And
I've heard of that. I've heard of that document. I like it. I do.
We're fans.
We're big fans. We're fans, yeah.
So obviously getting people to vote is, that's paramount for so many different organizations and such. What do you find, though, specifically to the South Florida chapter? Because I'm sure the league has, throughout the country, and the different chapters of it have different challenges depending on the electorate. What do you find is one of the biggest challenges down here in Miami?
I would say challenges in regards to, like,
getting people to vote.
I think first and foremost, the fact that South Florida, Miami-Dade particularly, has a really high transient population. So I think that, people who come like for short-term work on a contract basis, for instance, or just passing through on vacation. So our focus is really to target people who are residents here, they live here, they work here. That's really, in terms of exercising their right to vote, because a really big thing of ours is making sure that you're aware that your vote at a local level is not diluted in the way that it would be in a federal election where, going through a presidential election, it's really interesting getting all this interest now every 4 years, right, for the big, sexy presidential election. But, your vote is taken through the Electoral College. It's kind of like diluted, manipulated a little bit. Well, not manipulated, but I think diluted really is the right word. But at a local level, one vote is one vote. And it's crazy that sometimes a difference of 10 votes can...
Seen it happen many times.
Absolutely, right? At a municipal level, it makes a difference between one candidate over the other, which can drastically change your quality of life. And transparency in regards to where your taxpayer dollars are going, how certain initiatives and programs are carried out.
That's actually something I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about with you, since you would be the right person to, because, a lot of times we do talk about that here on the podcast, but, obviously because you are the president of this organization.
And the youngest.
And the youngest. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
You would be the right person to talk to it. You just summed it up perfectly. People always put so much emphasis on the general election of who's the president and, running for president. Obviously, that's very, very, very important, especially nowadays. It's extremely important. But I think a lot of people lack the foresight that the local elections, like commissioner, councilman, so on and so forth, that's what affects your everyday life. Talk to us a little bit about that, about the importance of local elections, because I still find, especially being, working in politics, I still find that people either they don't care or they don't know, and they get so caught up in party politics that they forget about the local elections.
At a very big picture level, absolutely. It's like the local nonpartisan elections that really make the biggest difference. So for instance, where you're sending your kids to school, it's the local school board that determines a lot of the direction of curriculum, programming, access to education, teacher salaries, things like kitchen table issues that affect us on an everyday, very real, tangible basis, right? Or for example, like if you want to start a business, a lot of your local, your tax code locally, legislation affecting what requirements you need, what licenses you need, that's very much determined at a local and state level. So that's really where you need to be paying attention. And, even like national politics, as we said, of course, it's important because it determines the tone of the nation overall, like international trade, foreign policy, international security. But at a very granular, everyday, day-to-day, the roads that you drive on, the right. School that you send your kids to, the way that you're able to operate small businesses, like the taxes that you're paying at a very local level, that it begins in the immediacy of where you live at the local level.
That's interesting because I think a lot of times you hear people saying that a lot, right? Like it's the local elections that are the most important, and yet I still feel like even at a national level, right? Right now there's a certain feeling of apathy, right? Yes. I think there's a like, because we're used to kind of almost hearing it at a local level, right? Where it's like, oh, whatever, I'm not gonna go vote because that's one commissioner and one school board member, who cares, right? But even I'm hearing it a lot this year, an election year, presidential election year, at the national level of like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What is the league trying to do to combat that sentiment, right? I mean, is that something, I would assume that's something that you guys have an initiative that you want to get people to vote, right? So how are you combating that?
So while there's many organizations that dedicate themselves to advocacy, we do a little bit of advocacy as well. Our distinguishing factor is voter services. And what do I mean by that? Is that we run voter registration drives. We make sure that you even register to vote to begin with, that you're aware of the elections coming up in your local area. We host candidate forums, which is something very particular that we do. So they're not debates, they are forums. They're spaces where candidates can share how they feel about issues and be able to share with residents, this is what I would do in this municipality if I'm elected.
Like a town hall.
More town hall. Exactly. That's why I'm very specific, not saying debate. It's a town hall. It's a forum where residents can ask questions, submit questions. We contract, trusted moderators, so oftentimes journalists, university professors, respected figures to be able to moderate, a forum on the local issues depending on the municipality. We publish voter guides. So, just where we interview candidates and we do not edit their answers. We want you, the voter, the resident, to see how do different candidates feel about the same three questions that we ask. So you're able to compare and contrast. Yes, we're very known for that, our voter guides.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, because I think a lot of times people, especially nowadays, again, the phrase "do your research" has totally you want to just talk about a phrase that's diluted. People just do the research until they find the answer they want. right?
yes.
And so I think it's important for organizations like yours, like the League of Women Voters. I keep wanting to call you guys like the Justice League of Women Voters. By the way, I'm
I
a
live for
total
that,
comic
yes.
book nerd, so like it's taking every fiber of my being not to say that out loud.
We are totally the local, the Miami-Dade Justice League of Women Voters.
Listen,
I love that.
I'm here for it. It's good that organizations like yourself are saying like, look, we don't have any skin in this game one way or the other, right? We just want you to get the facts. And here's what they're saying. Not, well, here's what this one's saying. Look how horrible they are. Blah, blah. It's just like, here's, again, and I love the fact that it's the same three questions, right? So
Yes.
it's like, you're all going to have to answer the same thing. There's no gotcha moment, shall we say.
What are the questions?
So the questions usually, they're very basic in regards to what is the issue du jour of the municipality. So whether it's taxes, whether it's like building codes, whether, very like quality of life issues for residents, or just whatever hot topic that is specific to the area. That's what we ask. Like, what would you do to improve the quality of life for residents? What is your take on, like X issue? And they're able to answer.
Do you, because I mean, obviously in every elections is always an issue. Do you guys have any initiatives on getting younger people out to vote?
Absolutely. I think just a testament of myself being a very young president. I am 32 years old. I'm passionate about voting as a young person. So I'm very invested always in making sure that young people are at the forefront. We love to collaborate with colleges, universities, high school students as we can, because civic engagement, there's, it's not a definite start or finish of a journey. You can enter at any time. Of course, the younger, the better. The more civically engaged you are at a younger age, the more integrated you are into society, the more you're aware of the world around you and how you participate in it.
Especially if you start, I think, as
Yeah.
early as high school, because a lot of kids graduate high school at 18 and they're 18 in their senior year, and the as you said, the earlier you get them to vote,
Absolutely.
the more engaged they will be. Because if you're still a senior high school and you're 18 and you vote for whether it's a general election or a local election, you feel a certain sense of power that it's like, wow, I got to cast my vote, and you most likely will continue voting. And it always, because me personally, I remember, my birthday is in October. I was like, yes, I could vote for the general election next month. And it was the general election.
I was there.
Like, big deal.
Yeah, like the following month. Like that, people when they're 18, they're like, oh, I could buy this and I could do this. I'm like, no, I could vote. Like,
I could vote now.
That's what I was like so happy about.
And did you know that when you are 16 and 17 years old, you can pre-register to vote?
Yeah.
That is
a lot of
something
people don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I always am like dumbfounded when I see people in their 20s, 30s, 40s that they've never voted before. And what does an organization like the league do to sort of turn that around for people, especially that are more seasoned, because if you're in your early 20s and you haven't voted, you could say, well, maybe it's because they're really young and they just haven't gotten around to
youth
it.
Youth
Right.
and experience,
But
or just like unfamiliar. It's not necessarily lack of experience, because that assumes that everybody has the same like exposure to voting and they're just choosing not to. Some people are just never introduced to it, and I
Right.
think that in schools, we're learning more and more that education is not just learning how to take a test or learning how to do math or studying history for the exam so you know exactly what year what happened. It's a world-class education can and should include civic engagement.
When you're a senior in high school, I can't remember this because it's been a few years since we graduated, but when you're a senior in high school, you have to take government economics your senior year. Don't they register? They do, right? I was like, did I dream that?
No. Or they did, because it depends. Like in mine, I was never registered to vote.
Right.
In fact, the first time I registered to vote was in college.
Really?
Yeah, it was not in high school for me. It was.
And yeah, in our school, I remember that they did. That's why, because I was a senior. I turned 18. Again, my birthday's in October at the beginning of my senior year. And I was ready to go that November. So, where I was trying to get at is, so for the people that are, more seasoned, like in their 30s and 40s, let's say, and you come across them where you get data that, a large amount of the electorate hasn't voted. or isn't even registered, how do you tackle that on to try to convince people
That voting is important.
that voting is important and that they should be casting their vote?
That honestly, elected officials will not represent or reflect the priorities of younger working people in their 30s and 40s if people in their 30s and 40s do not turn out to vote. That is just the reality of it. If you do not vote, they will not care.
I mean, that makes sense.
Because
if I don't have to talk to you, why do I care what your opinion is? You're not going to vote for me. I mean, there's a certain logic to that, right? Yeah.
it's kind of like, it's if say like you buy something but you don't leave any feedback on it, how is a manufacturer supposed to know how to adjust their product or service if they're not hearing feedback from people who are engaging with said product or service, right? So politics is not that different in the sense that, like, if you don't speak up, and really it's not just the election itself when you cast your vote or not, that's actually towards the end of the journey. Candidates, when they're running, especially in that 90-day stretch before the election, they are constantly at public events, they're hosting town halls, they, especially in Miami, cafecito con insert candidate here. Whether it's cafecito with like the police, cafecito with a candidate running, cafecito with your mayor.
Take
like
the obligatory picture of Versailles in La Ventanita. And here I'm having, cafecito at Versailles.
But you know what? Those are the moments where you, as a voter, you can take advantage and approach the person who is vying for a position that will make a difference in your life if elected. You can ask them questions and hold them accountable. Hey, what are you going to do for people like me? So whether it's economically, whether it's, regarding taxes, whether, social issues as well, that is the moment to also speak up. And that is where we come in as the League of Women Voters. We provide a structured platform where normal people, and that is something I really want to emphasize, you do not need to be this like very well-seasoned, political science nerd. This is what I studied in college and I've been doing this since I was in high school. Like, you can be a normal person, but simply have an interest in asking questions like, who represents me? What do they do? And we put you in touch with the civic engagement process.
I think that's so important because I think your average person, and again, this is coming from me that I've worked in politics, I've worked on the field, I've worked in different positions in politics. I think that most people don't know who their commissioners are, who their, representatives are. Depending on where they live, they have no idea. And a lot of people, like my parents have lived in the same place for 43 years in the same house. And I asked them one time, do you know who your commissioner is? And they're like, no. And my parents aren't ignorant people. My parents do vote and all that, but they didn't know. And I'm like, it's this person, and this person has actually been there for like 30 some years. And when I told them who it was, they're like, oh yeah, we've heard that name. I'm like, yeah, and are you happy with this person? Because this person is a person who's in charge of this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that people want to hold. I think that's a problem with politics today. That's why I think, again, bringing it locally is so important. Absolutely. People want to hold, the president or even the governor of wherever you live accountable. Like, they're accountable for everything. And obviously they're accountable for a significant amount of things. But sometimes, like, the sort of rage of people in terms of accountability is misdirected to other people in higher positions and not to the local level. And that's why I think that what the league is doing and organizations like this is so important. I also think that it's really important, and I love that you're talking about this, is that you are nonpartisan. Yes. Because I find that, especially nowadays that we live in such a partisan world, when it's a coordinated campaign of somebody running for whatever, or even a party trying to get people to vote and register people, sometimes people feel very pressured, maybe they don't want to pick a party. Maybe they're not ready to do that yet. And sometimes they don't even register. So I love that it's an organization that is nonpartisan, and just the main thing is vote.
Yes. The most important part is that you exercise your right to vote. Absolutely. Like I said, the only side that we pick is that of the U.S. Constitution.
Yep. Something I wanted to kind of bring up, because I think it ties back a little bit to the makeup of Miami-Dade County, is, again, when we were talking a little earlier, you were saying how, the makeup of the Miami-Dade chapter of the League of Women Voters, I had to like pause after every single one, is, when you look at it compared to some of the other chapters, it's a little bit more diverse. It's a little more mixed than, it's like it's got a nice blend of, young and seasoned, to not say old. Seasoned, obviously there's Latinas in there, Do you think that makes the League, and again, I love saying the League, like you guys are up in a satellite somewhere and just, patrolling the earth. The League maybe a little bit more accessible in Miami-Dade, because it may not have that veneer of stuffiness or seriousness like you said earlier, right? I think, would that be fair to say? Maybe it's a little.
I would say it like there's something for everyone. So there, for those who are looking for like a very structured, maybe more like homogenous environment, there's always that. I would say what I'm just really proud of, as the Miami-Dade League, is that yes, we are a really great cross section of Miami. We love partnering with organizations of all kinds that focus whether like on gender issues, that combating racism, combating, for example, like stigmas against immigrants, homophobia, etc. We really care very deeply about a lot of things that affect a lot of different kinds of people, because we want to live in a more equal society where it shouldn't matter what you look like, how you identify in any respect, your right to access the voting booth should never be questioned.
Right. You realize that the things you rattled off right now pretty much make you the Justice League, right? You realize that you're fighting for the same things
totally
they
the
fight
Miami-Dade
for.
Justice League. Yes.
Yeah, just so you know, just as a heads up.
Well, in fact, our logo is that of Lady Justice overlooking the Miami skyline. So,
okay. So, I mean, I know you said that the League of Women Voters now, men can be part of the league.
Yes, I wanted to spell that so badly. Just because we are the League of Women Voters, that's how we started. That is, like we want to stay true to our history. We welcome male members all the time. Your money's just as good. Your support is just as integral, because, for example, for us to live in an equal society, women's rights cannot be carried out solely by women. We need men's participation too.
Right.
We need everybody to participate.
So something I really wanted to talk to you about is the female woman vote, right? We hear so much about how women carry elections, and all this data shows us that since about 1980, the general election of 1980 and on to present day, women register to vote more than men, and actually go out and vote at higher rates than men. And the data shows that in every general election since about 1980, that gap has increased between men and women voting. So what is it that you think gets, as a whole, based on this data, more women to get out and vote than men?
I think something that I would love to speculate about this trend, which is super encouraging. Women are getting educated more. We're voting more. We're also starting more small businesses. We're also very entrepreneurial. Is that there's such a beautiful communal aspect to the way that women do things. Even in the past economic model where men were the main breadwinners, women started civic societies in that space. So to paint women even back then as these bored housewives with nothing to do, that was not always the case. That was also fertile ground for women to be able to meet together. For example, the suffragettes, moving on, other different kinds of groups, civic groups, much like the League of Women Voters, right, is that they were able to come together even in that space where women may or may not have been working consistently, but getting together, creating communities based on a common cause, encouraging each other. That is very intrinsic to being a woman. And so I think that's one of various aspects of why we show up in the numbers that we do, because there is a sense of like sisterhood and encouragement of each other that stems from these communal spaces, these civic societies.
Yeah, that's something, somebody who follows politics so much, that's something that I always hear in campaigns and in elections, like the suburban woman vote, the black woman vote, like always women from different walks of life, but that vote is so important. So I was just always very curious about that, in terms of the dynamics of the actual voting data, that women really do vote so much more than men.
Yeah, which makes sense because women are just better.
Who run the world? Girls.
Who run exactly. Look, if anybody was right, it's Beyonce. and we can just end it there. Like, I mean, that's
we're going to give her album of the year.
Yeah, that's it. That's why
we don't want to be attacked.
No, at all. She deserves all the albums of the year, everything, even when she wasn't even on. But no, as we start to wrap up, Ibis, again, thank you for coming by, because this is so important, right? I mean, voting in general is just so important, and it's our duty. It's not even a right. It's our duty as Americans to vote for all the elections. Because again, no vote, no voice. I live by that. As we wrap up, how can they find more information, from the Justice League of Women Voters? How can they,
I love our new name. So absolutely, you can find out more about us by looking us up online, lwvmiamidade.org. You can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, LWV Miami Dade. We host every so often. Our signature networking event is called Cocktails and Conversations. So
I love an alliteration.
I love it. And so what we do is that it has a two-part focus. One, supporting small business. That is something that we do not host at chain restaurants. We're very intentional about supporting local businesses, local restaurants. We are in the habit of inviting the elected officials in that area to come, and they typically do show up. And what I love about it is that, even in something like a mixer, we're able to bring government closer to people. Mm-hmm. So you could just show up at your local restaurant, your local bar, and you're able to have a conversation with your councilman, your mayor, right there, face to face. In fact, we, our last Cocktails and Conversations in December, our holiday edition, it was in South Miami, and we were nerding out over upcycling for an hour. And it was great.
That's a lot of upcycling.
And people were just so enthused and engaged, and you could tell there was a real delight, that elected officials had in meeting their constituents, their residents. We had another one, our last one in February during Black History Month. We partnered with the South Dade NAACP, and we held it in Homestead. So people love that we went out there, especially certain parts of the county tend to feel very abandoned. A lot of organizations don't like to trek all the way out there, but the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade is about Miami-Dade. So we will come to you. We also want to know, where should we show up? Where do you want to see us?
Right. So do you also conduct these at pop-ups? I'm just saying, I may know we may know somebody,
We may.
Okay, all right. Just put it out there,
Here's some chicken.
There's some chicken guys. I don't know, Pin Pan Polo, something. I don't know. We'll get back to you on that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those are and any other events, for example, such as candidate forums. Also please subscribe to our email newsletter. That is the best way to follow us, so that you can be on top of any kind of news in your area about municipal elections, events that we're having or that we're hosting. Our Voters Digest. Yeah.
Well, you got all the deets now on where you could find the League of Women Voters. Madam President, thank you so much for being with us today. We really, really appreciate, I know you had a lot of things to do, and we really appreciate you taking time and, informing our listeners of what you do and the importance of the organization and of voting. Our motto here in Pero Let Me Tell You is listen, laugh, and learn. And we're happy that, our listeners and Pero Primos can learn from what you told us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me and for giving the legal platform. And I hope this is not the last time. There's much more to come.
Much more to come. So thank you so much, Ibis.
Pero Let Me Tell You is co-hosted by Darian Borges and Ismaeliano, produced by Ismaeliano, and our theme, Pero Let Me Tell You Freestyle, is composed by Michael Angelo Lomlaplex, the official gay guy. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes.